This unbearable pain in my stomach.
Your symptoms show sign of epithelial carcinoma of the cervix.
Wait, I don't know what that is.
It's cancer. Malignant.
Malignant? Action.
There's something different about these cells.
Do you have any samples?
I might need to get the patient's consent first.
You don't need their consent.
Henrietta cervix. I'm going to cut off some of the tissue and put it in the culture. I got the family to approve of the autopsy. I twisted our reasons about the research and told them they would be able to help their children.
Great. I'll use her tissues to grow her cells in culture.
I'm going to be asking you a couple of questions about medical ethics. So, how do doctors convince patients into giving away their tissues during research?
When the doctors tell their patients that the research can help others, they're more likely to agree because they feel sympathy for others, and this persuades the patient into giving away their tissues without seeing any of the consequences with this research.
That's a very harsh issue. What are some examples of the consequences of tissue research today?
Well, in 2005, a scientist at Arizona State University took tissues from a Native American tribe and used them for schizophrenia and inbreeding without their consent. And these tissues were only supposed to be used for diabetes research. So when this tribe figured out that they didn't ask for consent for the inbreeding and schizophrenia, they sued the university. In another case, in 2006, 700 women found out that doctors took their placentas without any of their consent, and they actually used these placentas to test for abnormalities that could help their hospital defend against lawsuits over birth defects.
Poor people. Are there any court rulings that contradict the laws of consent, such as the Hippocratic Oath and the Nuremberg Code?
Yes. In a case against tissue rights activist John Moore, the Supreme Court of California ruled against him, saying that once tissues are removed from the body, with or without consent, a person no longer owns these tissues. However, these laws that you just talked about require the consent of the patient and for the physician to put the patient first and foremost, which was not the case with John Moore. And basically, after he got cancer on his spleen, they removed it, and he signed the consent form just to remove it. But when he realized that on his follow-up appointments they were starting to take blood samples and bone marrow, he got suspicious, and 7 years after the surgery, they even had him sign a consent form for creating a cell line from his blood and bone marrow. So instantly he was angry and hired a lawyer, and the lawyer found out that throughout these 7 years the doctors were using his tissues, his blood and bone marrow, to create a cell line called Mo that could be worth millions of dollars.
Well, that's a very striking issue that I think we need to address in our world today. But thank you for your time, Ms. Long.
You're welcome.
The common rule doctors are supposed to use regarding individual rights in research.
Well, crap, I'm sorry. Hold on. Okay. Well, the common rule is that any individual has the right to disagree or agree to operations or being tested.
Okay. Do you believe that doctors are obligated to take tissues during medical and diagnostic procedures for research that could potentially help others? What type of restrictions should be placed on this type of research?
tissues can benefit mankind in many ways, so I don't believe any restriction should be placed on this research. It's just a sacrifice of the donor. The donor has to make a sacrifice for the benefit of mankind.
Should donors be paid for donating their tissues?
It's a huge
How could they take my mother's cells and keep them for themselves? They even named them HeLa cells.
I understand your pain. We should have these people sued. After all, they make a business and profit for themselves. We should get the money. Don't you think we deserve at least that?
We should sue them. I can't believe they did that at John's office. Should have never have trusted them. Now I can't trust any doctor.
My mother went through all this pain, and yet they said nothing to us.
They're cold-hearted and selfish. They're researching for all the wrong reasons, just to help themselves.
After 24 years, we find out about these so-called HeLa cells, and they're still here today.
Doctors say they donated? No, my mother's cells were stolen. Their morals are getting taken over by their jobs. They hurt my family, and they have no sympathy towards us.
That's right.